Yeah, I ain't no suit-wearing businessman like you. You know, I'm just a gangster, I suppose, and I want my corners.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Five Corners Podcast. I am Jet Bonifay, and on the other line, he uses Jersey City hood skills to cop that Lysol disinfectant below street value. It's Ace Merluza. What's going on?
That's right. Yes, sir. Going good, man. I got 4 fresh new cans of Lysol spray, one on the market for awesome price. I mean, when you keep your eyes and ears on the streets, the lessons of yesteryear applies. Everything's still applicable.
Let them know what that scent is like, though. What's that smell?
Crisp linen,
Yeah,
kid.
no doubt. No doubt. Let them know. We got Marisk on as well. What's happening, brother?
What's up, fam?
So again, we wanted to continue to honor our frontline healthcare workers during this pandemic. And what better way to do that than to give our audience some insight on what they're facing during this pandemic. So hopefully that'll motivate us to do everything in our power to ease those frontline essential workers' daily burden. So with that being said, tonight we welcome a nurse who worked in a COVID ICU unit during the height of this pandemic in New York City. Welcome to the podcast, Jansen. Thank you for your service. How are you?
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm good.
Jansen, can you give us your official title and your nursing specialty?
Sure. So my name is Jansen. I'm a registered nurse in New York City. Specialty currently, I work at a orthopedic hospital. So I work pre-op and recovery there. I also work in the cardiac cath lab at other hospitals currently. Most recently, like Jet mentioned, I was assigned to a COVID ICU in New York City because of my past ICU experience.
This is also the next kind of loaded question for every Filipino nurse. Why did you choose nursing as your profession?
My mom told me. Oh, that would have been my answer.
So funny enough, my mom actually discouraged me from being a nurse because my mom was a nurse.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I wanted to be a nurse. She told me not to. So I guess I did the next best thing, or attempted the next best thing, which was pharmacy school, which I did for 3 years and didn't really like that. And then went to physical therapy. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do what I wanted to do originally. I fell in love with it. But I mean, the reason why I chose it, partly because my mom was a nurse, but mostly as a kid, my grandfather had passed away when I was younger after having quadruple bypass heart surgery, and at that time it was I witnessed the amazing care he received in the hospital, in the ICU, and in the nursing home during his last few days, and that kind of inspired me. And I don't think I realized it at the time, but as I got older, I realized I wanted to give back and do what those nurses did for my grandfather. I wanted to do that for other people.
That's awesome, man. It's very admirable of you. And I know the story. We know the story of how difficult it's been for you the past few months. So what keeps you motivated every day, especially during these times, to be a nurse?
I mean, it's been crazy. I mean, my family obviously is my main motivation. Me and my wife both got sick early on in March with COVID. My mom eventually got sick shortly after and needed to go to the hospital. She was admitted to the hospital for a while as well with COVID. And they're my motivation every day. They're the reason I do everything that I do. That's what gets me up in the morning.
Obviously, as a nurse, you take all the precautions and you follow the protocols to keep you safe. But how can you recount for us how you think you were infected?
I mean, it's really difficult to pinpoint exactly. I can assume, it's a possibility that I was exposed to it at work. We take care of a lot of patients on a daily basis. A lot of those patients travel both domestically and internationally. And, ever since January, the seriousness of this, gradually increased up until March, where it started to get, much more serious, or people started to realize how big it was going to be. So, I mean, for me, I think it was either I got in contact with it somewhere at work or during my commute at work, because I take the subway in from Jersey City into the city.
Got it. And what were some of the first symptoms that you began to experience, and how did you feel throughout that time you had the infection, and what were some key indicators that made you think, oh man, I think I just might have this?
hmm Yeah, so I mean, to start off, so it really started March 23rd. I like literally remember it. I woke up at 5 a.m. driving into the city. As I woke up getting ready for work, I was kind of like achy. I had a little cough, felt pretty normal. I just figured it was, just because I didn't get enough rest during the weekend. And, no one wants to go into work at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. So, and at that time, the assumption or what they were telling was that COVID was really just affecting the elderly and people with comorbidities or other diseases that they were dealing with. So me being a 30-something-year-old, relatively active and healthy, I was driving to work thinking like, oh, this is, I started to question it, like, could this be coronavirus? Could this be COVID? And I was like, what are the chances? I'm so young, I'm healthy, I have these mild symptoms. But as I started to drive, I started to process like the risk and benefit factors. Like, all right, so let's just say I do have it. Is it worth me possibly going into work, exposing my coworkers, exposing our patients, all just so I save one sick day? Like, probably not, So as I got to work, I parked outside the parking garage where I usually park. I called my manager. I let her know what was going on. I told her, I don't have a fever. I just have a mild cough here and there and a little achiness. And, she encouraged me to just go home, take the day, rest up, and to keep her posted. So I literally drove back home, climbed back into bed. And then later that day, things started to progress. I started to feel warmer. I started to feel more tired, weak. I eventually had a fever. And then as the days went on, all those symptoms definitely got much, much worse. The achiness was probably the most achy I've ever felt ever in my life. Like, I felt like I was lifting a million pounds the day before or something. Just trying to like rotate and like move a little bit was excruciating. Other than that, and the migraines were pretty bad because I don't usually have headaches. Those two things were probably the worst symptoms for me up until I got the shortness of breath. Other than those three things, it pretty much felt like any cold or flu symptoms. You just felt tired. You obviously had fevers, and you just wanted to try and sleep it off. But yeah, the migraines and body aches were the worst for me. And then the added anxiety of questioning whether or not it was COVID or if it was just the flu definitely heightened things that time. So the 23rd was the first day I got sick. It took me about a week to figure out, where do I go get tested? How do I find out if I am positive?
So it took you a full week to confirm it, right?
No, not even to confirm it, to figure out who would test me, where can I go to get tested? Because at that time, it was very like, only specific people. If you traveled, if you were exposed to someone that was positive, then we could test you. Otherwise, like,
Wow.
they're not testing you because they wanted to, make the best use of their resources at that time, which I understand. Luckily, me and my wife, explained to our local testing center that we're both healthcare workers, that we've both been out of work for the past week, and they accepted us to get tested over there. And then from that point, it took another week before we even got results.
Wow. So during that timeline, the 2 weeks, were you recovering? How were you feeling after? I mean, it seems like it's been 3 weeks since you felt poorly. When did you start feeling like you were back to normal?
So the 23rd was when it started. By Thursday, I started to feel a lot better. The fevers were coming down, the achiness was coming down, the migraines were going down. I was taking some medications at home, monitoring myself. Thankfully, me and my wife are both nurses, so we're able to we have a lot of stuff at the house, like,
Sure.
A thermometer, a pulse ox to monitor our oxygen. We have a stethoscope to listen to each other's lungs. We have a blood pressure cuff if we needed it. We have some medications, but they're all over the counter, like Tylenol, Mucinex, cold medicine, Vicks Vapor Rub. We were using all that
That
stuff.
fixes everything, man, by the way.
Yeah. So the first wave for me was that first week. That Thursday, I started to feel better. Thursday, Friday, no fevers. Saturday, Sunday, I started to get fevers again, started to get achy again, it was kind of like I was coming back down. I was like, what's going on? I thought I was coming out of it already. So after that weekend, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was all kind of on the way back. And then Wednesday was like, I think, my like climax, like the apex of it all. I was sleeping. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I want to say Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. I woke up and I was just like having trouble breathing. And I was like, what's going on? I was like, I sleep on my back all the time, no problems. And this is actually waking me up. So I got up. I was trying to catch my breath. I was trying to force myself to cough. Maybe, I had something in my lungs or something in my throat that was, obstructing my breathing. Nothing was helping, and it wasn't like it was like severe shortness of breath. It was literally just like, looked like, if you looked at me, you would think I was fine, but I could tell that I was breathing differently.
Yeah.
So like I got up, I went down, I was like, all right, I'm gonna make some tea. The tea kind of helped. I think the heat kind of alleviates some of the stress a little bit maybe, and the anxiety, but it helped a little bit. But to be honest, that night was probably the scariest night for me. I didn't go to sleep from that point on because I was too scared to go back to sleep. I was worried that I could potentially die in my sleep.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So at that point, I guess it's what, a week and a half into it, and then
a week and a half.
And then by the time you felt good enough to go back to work, how long had transpired at that point?
So by Wednesday, the next day, I called my doctor first thing in the morning, let them know what was going on with the shortness of breath. Thankfully, she suggested something called a bronchodilator, an albuterol inhaler. And a lot of people that have asthma would be familiar with that. It's a rescue inhaler, basically. And that's what she suggested. And I was like, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that would be what she prescribed for COVID, but that literally probably saved my life. I was thankfully only on it for 2 days. It does have some unfortunate side effects. It kind of makes you wired. It increases your heart rate. So I did have some trouble sleeping the first those 2 nights that I was on it. But as soon as I was done, I came off of it feeling much, much, much better. I was ready to get back to work. I was excited, motivated, eager to get back to work. The only thing that was holding me off for another week was this fever. I would spike a fever literally every 2 to 3 days. And as a healthcare worker, the CDC recommended at least 72 hours without a fever before you can get cleared to go back to work. So our hospital would call us every day to see how we were doing, see if there was any progression. And unfortunately, it took a week before I could control the fevers without the use of Tylenol.
Yeah, after that, you created an Instagram page, a Facebook group, Coronavirus RN. Can you speak a little bit about why you felt compelled to do that? I think you were one of the early ones, obviously having had contracted coronavirus, COVID. Why did you feel like you wanted to create that platform?
I mean, the main reason why I created that was in the first week of my sickness, one of my best friends lost his father to COVID. And it kind of hit me pretty hard. I was at the same time dealing with me and my wife recovering from COVID. And I felt a little guilty that I hadn't reached out to them and their family to see if everyone was okay on their side. And then all of a sudden I get a call saying his dad had passed away. So I felt helpless being home recovering. I felt useless not being able to go to work and helping my coworkers treat the other COVID patients. It was very frustrating during my recovery to feel like I have all this knowledge and I'm stuck here at home, doing nothing.
And I think that's probably the innate feeling across the board, right? I have a brother who's a nurse. I have a mom who's been a 30+ year nurse. Their first thought is like, you guys are thinking like firefighters, right? Most normal human beings, when they see a house burning down, they run away, right? Mm-hmm. Firefighters go right into that fire. So what you're saying is exactly, the exact same analogy, the exact same parallel. Here it is, left and right, people are dying, people are going, getting intubated. And your first thought is, I feel guilty. I should go in. I was trying to convince my mom to retire, and she was like, no, this is what I do. So, we applaud you for that. Obviously that's, obviously heartbreaking. And this is what's been going on. And there's almost 90,000 Americans that have died. So when you did get back, what was the worst for you? At what point when you came back, was the actual worst part of it once you got into back into the ICU?
So once I got back to the ICU, the first day, I was still super motivated. It was weird because I was so excited and I was talking to my coworkers, telling them how, motivated and excited I was to get back to work and be working with them and helping them out. And everyone was just telling me like, dude, like, just wait till you come back to work. Like, we get that you're excited and you want to help out and everything, but like just wait till you get back to work. And like in my head, I was like, how bad could it really be? First day I walked in and it was like a completely different place. We had to construct certain walls in order to be able to ventilate the patient rooms so that we could take care of mass amounts of COVID patients in a general area. We had patients in the OR rooms because they had the capabilities of having a ventilator and having the negative pressure in the room to properly ventilate and filter the air as well. So it was, when I walked in the first day, it was like chaos. Like the number of nurses, the number of doctors, the number of anesthesiologists on my floor, I want to say was 3 times the normal.
So give our audience an insight on what that looks like. What is a typical ICU in terms of number of patients on the floor, sans COVID? What does that normally look like? And what were you facing, that day that you walked back in?
So, I mean, it depends on the size of the hospital. A small community hospital may have anywhere from, I would say, 10 to 20 beds in an ICU. A bigger hospital in New York City where they have a 1,000-bed capacity, they may have an ICU. They'll probably have a specific ICU for different things. So they'll probably have a total of 3 to 4 different ICUs, each with 20 beds. My hospital, like I mentioned earlier, we typically, we're a specialized hospital. We do orthopedic, elective, and emergent surgeries typically. So in the beginning of all this, we were not expecting to participate in the care for COVID patients, not because we didn't want to, but just because we don't have an emergency room. And that's typically how you would receive a COVID patient, is through the emergency room.
Right.
And because we don't have an emergency room, there was no entrance basically for these patients. So what ended up happening as the surge happened, we started to prepare ourselves to take on that possibility that we may need to start taking patients from other hospitals.
Sure.
So we constructed we made the changes that we needed to all of our floors. We dedicated 5 of the 9 floors in the hospital to strictly COVID patients. Med-surg COVID, which is, a regular hospital floor. And then we had the one main COVID ICU floor, which was capable of taking in, we were expecting to be able to do 38 patients in our ICU facility.
Right.
It was different in the sense that it wasn't even an ICU when I walked in. It was used to be a pre-op, recovery room, and an OR suite. And then now it's this 38-bed ICU.
Right. Wow. So in that 38-bed ICU, what were you guys doing in terms of, obviously you said that there's no ER portion, right? Were you intubating in that 38-room ER? Was that like a triage area? How are you guys dealing? Was it all, are you guys trying to triage, more severe cases, trying to move them out? How is that flow inside the actual hospital itself?
So for my floor specifically, we were receiving already intubated patients or critically ill patients from the ICU of the hospital next door to us. So there's a hospital next door to us that's actually connected through a walking bridge where they're able to transfer these patients on beds, on the ventilators. And like, even just that process alone was an undertaking itself. We had to basically make sure that the patient was fully enclosed and covered so that we didn't spread the virus while we were transferring them in the hallways. So they're hooked up to a ventilator, they're pushing a bed, the patient is covered with, basically it looks like a shower curtain, like a plastic that basically just shields, anything that's coming off of the ventilator and off of the patient from entering the general area that they're walking through. And typically you would transfer a patient with maybe 2 nurses. This was requiring, I want to say, anywhere from 4 to 6 nurses.
And why is that, Jansen?
So you have the 2 nurses pushing the beds. You have a respiratory therapist, assisting with transporting the ventilator, and you have 1 to 2 anesthesiologists to make sure if there was something to go wrong during transport, we have enough support, we have enough doctors, we have everyone that needs to be there in order to address that situation.
Wow.
How many people normally would you have to transport a patient? Because when I think of transport a patient, when I've been in the hospital, there's usually just two porters bringing me to where I need to go. So you just mentioned about four, is that 4 to 5 other people just to keep someone alive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Wow.
typically typically in the ICU, you'll probably have 2 nurses that'll go with you to transfer, because those beds are usually bigger and heavier. And again, there's other things that you might need to bring in with like a IV pole and medications that the patient needs to continuously be on. And again, that's another thing. These patients were on, numerous IV drips that could not be stopped, not even for, 30 seconds.
Jansen, so it's a little bit of a personal question, and because I want to know how it was done in your hospital. I had Ace and Jet know that I had an uncle that just passed away from COVID, and he was doing fine. Well, so a little bit of backstory. He went in for pneumonia, ended up doing okay. He was slated to come home the beginning of I want to say last week, and then all of a sudden, the situation deteriorates, and then he ends up in the ICU. So, what are some of the
Mhm.
common reasons patients can end up in the ICU from COVID when it wasn't really? It didn't seem like it was COVID. He tested negative for COVID. I want to say he was tested
Mhm.
negative for COVID twice. And once you hear that as a family, you breathe a little bit of sigh of relief. Yeah, it's pneumonia, but pneumonia you've been recovered for. I just want to see. So the more common reasons patients end up in the ICU from COVID, from your experience as a patient and as someone that's seen it happen.
So I mean, I'd love to like kind of touch up on your personal experience too, to kind of just give you a little bit of perspective on that. If we can start with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, and to also answer your question, so typically a patient's going to be upgraded to ICU if their breathing situation requires a ventilator. There are some floors that do manage ventilators, but that's more for more stable vented patients. If you are newly put on a vent, you are not stable. Obviously, you're requiring very close watch and attention to manage the ventilator, and to manage the medications that you're on, to make sure that the patients are comfortable while they're on a ventilator. Because as you can imagine, it's probably the most uncomfortable thing to possibly experience in my eyes. Working in the ICU in the past, that was one of my biggest fears, was not ever having to be on a ventilator. During this whole time, I actually had a conversation with my wife, and I told her, I was like, babe, if I ever need to be on a ventilator, please make sure that I'm knocked out. And it's because it's uncomfortable. But the thing is, at some point when you're coming off of it, they need to wake you up. We can't keep these patients asleep and then wake them up and then be like, all right, we're gonna take this tube out and you're gonna breathe fine. That's not how it works. There's a
Maybe sedated, yeah.
You de-escalate all those medications until you can slowly wake them up and their body gets better. So back to your experience with your uncle, what my thoughts on is, it's possible that your uncle was already positive in the beginning, and granted, you're saying they had 2 negative results. Those test results are not 100% accurate in itself, let alone is the person doing the test doing it 100% correct. So there's been instances where people were getting false negatives, regardless of whether it was done correctly. It was done correctly, but the accuracy of the test is just not 100%. And then you add in human error to that, and it makes it even less accurate. And to be honest, like, the pneumonia is kind of what I think everyone who came in with COVID, or a majority of people who came in with COVID that ended up on a ventilator, was because they had pneumonia. Because basically, so pneumonia is basically a lung infection where you can get it from, the bacteria that's normal in the air in our general lives. And I think what happens is, when you get exposed to that bacteria, as well as the virus, your body is now fighting off two things at once, and it may be able to fight off the pneumonia, but once that virus is able to take advantage, the decline happens rather quickly. So your uncle, my assumption is that your uncle was able to kind of maintain his condition for a good amount of time with the antibiotics and all the treatments that he was getting in the hospital for that week or two or however long he was in there. And then at that time, maybe his body just started to get so run down from all the medications, run down from fighting the pneumonia for so long, and then now the COVID is like, all right, now's my time to
strike,
to do my work, and that's why the decline happens pretty quickly. If I could share a story, one of my friends who lived in California asked me to check on his dad in South Jersey. All he had was a fever. I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll check on him. I went there, listened to his lungs, perfect, clear. Put a pulse ox on his finger to check his oxygen, perfect. He's like 96, 97% on room air, just a fever. So I gave him some general instructions. Take your Tylenol every 4 to 6 hours. Take your temperature every 4 to 6 hours. If your temperature is above this, take the Tylenol. If it's not above that, don't take the Tylenol. I saw him on Thursday. He was already on antibiotics prophylactically, meaning in advance. He was on antibiotics by his doctor just in case. And he was on his last dose the next day, that Friday. By Sunday, he was in the hospital intubated. And my assumption is he probably had pneumonia when I saw him. It probably wasn't severe because he was already on antibiotics for, I don't know how long. And then he finished the last dose on Friday. And the way antibiotics works is it's not like, oh, I take it Friday and it's good for a week. You take it Friday, and by Friday night, it's out of your system, and now you're susceptible. So if that pneumonia was still kind of festering and just like barely there, now it has Friday night, Saturday to like ramp up, and then now COVID is also involved. So it just speeds up the entire the entire decline. And he was rushed to the hospital. They checked his X-ray. Sure enough, he has pneumonia in both lungs. They intubate him they intubated him pretty quickly because that hospital was attempting to intubate early in hopes of having a better outcome in the end.
Wow.
He's been in the hospital for the past 3 weeks. He's doing much better. He still has a long way to go, but thankfully they're starting to wake him up and they're trying to get him off of the ventilator. And hopefully our prayers go out to that family, and I'm looking forward to seeing him outside of the hospital, because it seriously breaks my heart to know I went to go see this guy on a Thursday. Everything was completely fine. He had a fever. And then 3 days later, he ends up in the hospital, and now he's been in the hospital for almost a month. And
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, just to relate real quick, guys. My uncle he had been homesick for about 3 weeks before the shortness of breath kicked in, and then they went in and they treated him for pneumonia. Yeah, it's for a family that's going through it, or for me, a family that's kind of went through it pretty much twice. It's hard on our emotions, because it's not every day that you're going into the hospital and you kind of just. My uncle went kind of quick once he got into the hospital, and there's no answers that we had that were as clear as I think would have been as clear as Jansen's just gave, which is why I asked him the question as to how rapidly COVID can kind of just deteriorate the situation. Obviously, Jansen, your home life has been impacted by this, but how specifically? How are your emotions carrying you forward, and how is being a nurse kind of propelling you to stay positive?
I mean, to be honest, this whole quarantine coronavirus thing, as much as it is had a huge negative impact on the world, I think there is still a silver lining to hopefully see through all of this. And I definitely see that in myself. If you asked me 6 months earlier, would I be participating on a podcast, providing healthcare information, I would never had said, oh yeah, I think I would do that. But this whole experience has enlightened me and transformed me into someone that really, really, truly cares and wants to help in any way possible. I mean, my home life right now, I've actually been off of work for a while because obviously the cases started to come down, thankfully. And as a result, my hospital was able to return all the patients that we were holding for the other hospital. And they started the process of deconstructing the ICU and sterilizing everything and taking cultures to make sure that everything is where it needs to be for us to get back into our normal routine. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely had a huge impact on me, my family life, my mentality, my perspective in general. I look at things totally different, and that's my hope too, is that as much as this has brought sadness to a lot of people and families, I hope people do see the light at the end of it, and we realize that it's also made us appreciate each other more. It's made us appreciate our families. It's made us appreciate going to a restaurant and having a meal inside of a restaurant.
Right.
It makes us appreciate being able to go to a basketball game, to a football game even more, because who knows what the future of those things is going to be like in the upcoming months. So, my hope is that everyone, finds some silver lining in this, whether it's you were able to learn how to play the piano while you were in quarantine, whether you learned another language, whether you read one book during all this, take that as a positive.
Started a podcast.
Yes, started a podcast. Take that as a positive out of this unfortunate event. That's all I can ask. And I know this has been super hard for people to be stuck at home for months, to not be working, to lose their jobs. It's not just a health concern. It was financial and economic concern for sure. Small businesses, even big businesses, are all suffering because of this. And it hasn't just affected the elderly. It hasn't just affected those with other illnesses. It's literally affected the entire world.
So let's, when you're talking about, obviously you're one of the very rare few that, obviously New York City was one of the hardest hit places in the entire globe, right? And you were at the cusp of it as it was cresting. You got sick, you had it. So you have a very, very nuanced perspective, I would say. You're probably in the top, and not that you want to be, but top 2 or 3% of people that have seen this not only firsthand, but dealt with it therapeutically. What has changed since the beginning of the infections to the apex of the infections to where we're at now? How have doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, what have they changed strategically now that they know a little bit more about this novel coronavirus?
I mean, I don't know if I can speak on that. I mean, they were trying anything and everything in the beginning, and I think they've started to kind of stray away from specific drugs that they thought worked. And I think it's still questionable whether or not they are working. But each facility, each hospital, each doctor is basically making their own decision based off of their experiences with their patient experiences on what works and what doesn't work. Because some hospitals felt one thing worked, some other hospitals felt another thing worked. Right. So they were really just, there's no studies. And I know as much as people want to look at healthcare as a science, I spoke to an emergency room doctor in New York City during all of this, and I told him he put it best, that healthcare is an art. It's all about balancing things. It's not an absolute yes, an absolute no. This is how you got it. This is how we treat it. Everybody is different. People react to those medications differently. Some people can't take certain medications because of their health conditions. Some people can't afford certain medications, maybe. So I think each healthcare professional has been doing their best to customize and cater to each specific patient to figure out what's going to be the most effective for them, instead of everyone being on the same thing like we were initially trying to do.
All right, so you're already coming up on a few months since your recovery, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think it's great that you're now sharing your experience. It's very rare that we have someone who is, one, a nurse, and two, had been infected by COVID and lived to recover and speak about it. So how has your everyday life been impacted? I mean, obviously, Jet, Mercy, and I have talked about how things have changed on our end. I know I've spoken at length of how I can't go to the gym, despite the fact that gyms have opened here in Texas.
Don't go.
Um,
Don't go. Don't do it.
and and we know you got a nice side hustle there. You know, Jansen is also a realtor on the side, so shout out to Jansen's side hustle. So what has changed for you in terms of your day to day outside of work, since you mentioned that you're taking a bit of a break now?
Yes, right now, yeah, like you said, the gym. I think that's been a big thing. Like I didn't realize how important going to the gym and working out was until after I got sick. When I returned back to work, I was having trouble walking 2 city blocks. I was winded. I was getting tired going up two flights of stairs because I just spent the last 3 weeks sitting on my couch like recovering. I was like super deconditioned. So now that I'm recovered, that's probably one of the biggest changes, not being able to work out at the gym. So I've turned to running outside, working out at home, and doing those kind of things. The biggest thing is I think the social aspect of life. I was so used to having friends and family over, having dinners together, barbecuing, going out to eat, and hanging out with people, going to the bars. Like the whole social aspect is completely different, and it's also been, I think, affecting everyone mentally, emotionally, because we are social creatures. We rely on each other to interact with each other. It's amazing what technology has brought us, and we can do things like a podcast, from Texas and New Jersey or in California, but nothing is going to replace the true social interaction of in person, hanging out with people in person, talking in person, enjoying each other's company, being able to hug each other, like shake someone's hand. Like that's been, it's become kind of taboo now because it's just like, well, really, what do? You do the
Right.
upload? Do you just
Wax on,
wave?
wax off. Yep.
Yeah. Like some people are cool about it. And I think your closer circle will probably, be the first thing that becomes back to normal, where like you're just like, whatever. If you get sick, we get sick. But I've been with my family. I've been with some of my friends occasionally, trying to maintain the social distancing thing. But it gets to a point where it's like my apartment isn't that big. I can't have people 6 feet away from me. Like we can meet each other on the street and like be across the street, like talk to each other from across the street. But in reality, it's like we also need to get back to a sense of normalcy. Like as much as we want to protect each other and the general public, I think it's also important that we get back to our normal lives. And it's going to be up to each individual out there to decide what their limitations are. Do they wear masks every day? Do they wear gloves everywhere? Do they stop taking the subway? Do they stop taking the taxis? Do they stop taking Ubers? It's going to be a personal preference from here on out. It's going to be interesting to see what the summer is going to be like. The beach, the boardwalk. What is all that going to look like?
Yeah, we've already seen some shots right from Belmar about how many people showed up there, right?
Yeah, and it's crazy. I think that's probably a huge influx just because of the fact that people are just dying to get out there. It's been 2 months and they're just like, I'm going to go anywhere that's not here in my house. They're going to go to the beach. They're going to go to the park. They're going to go anywhere.
So, chances with that in mind, I think since we're looking towards the future of that, what do you think in the next 6 months or 6 to 12 months? What do you think it'll look like without a vaccine or any effective therapeutics?
I think without a vaccine, in my opinion, again, this is anecdotal, it's not supported by any studies or data. In my opinion, I think within 12 months, we'll see a much closer return to normalcy. Within 6 months, that would put us at the end of this year. You know what? Like where I live now, it looks relatively normal. There's people walking without masks. There's people walking with masks, and like I said, that's going to become a personal preference. I don't think it's going to be fair to mandate that everybody wear a mask. Number one, it's hard to breathe through. It irritates your face. If you've seen the pictures of healthcare workers that had to wear those masks at work, like it causes irritation to your face if you have to wear something that your face is not normal used to wearing all the time. As far as like without a vaccine, I think there's been a lot of focus on antibody testing right now, which I think does two things. It suggests that you probably had COVID or were exposed to COVID, and you now have these antibodies in your body to help protect you to some degree. It does not mean that you're immune. It does not mean that you can go hug everybody and things can return to normal, but it suggests that we can start that process if you're comfortable with it. You know, this is like the flu. This is like the common cold in a sense, where you get exposed to it, you get sick, your body produces antibodies. It figures out that those are the bad guys, and the next time they come into your body, we're gonna attack them, and that's how it kind of works. So, you know, I think quarantining severely can also have a negative effect on your immunity. I've read some articles that suggest, you know, the fact that you're not exposing yourself to these antigens or these pathogens weakens your immune system because it's no longer fighting anything. So it gets relaxed. It's like, oh, we're in a safe place. I don't need to work hard to protect you anymore. Great, I'm just gonna stop doing it then. It's kind of like that thing, like, you know, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, in a sense. You know, that technically probably doesn't apply to COVID specifically, but in a sense, if you're not exposing yourself to certain things, your body is going to get weaker because it no longer identifies those things to fight.
So now that we're, you know, again, like you mentioned, the caseload is coming down in New York in general. New Jersey, two heaviest states have seen a steady decline, even though some states are still on the incline. The two biggest states that had the most infections are starting to come down. So with that perspective in mind, you know, what's been the worst part besides the death toll? You know, throughout the course of this pandemic, what have you seen was the one thing that kind of that still haunts you or that still bothers you about this pandemic besides all the death?
I mean, to be honest, like when you talk about the worst thing about this whole thing, I mean, I don't think I might be mistaken in what you're asking me, but like the worst thing for me during this whole thing was taking care of patients, and what we were doing in our hospital was we were FaceTiming with family members so that they would get a chance to see their family members, obviously because they were restricted. There's no visitors allowed in the hospitals. So we were allowing them to see and speak to their family members so that hopefully their family members could hear their voices. And that was really the worst and hardest part for me, was to hear these families encouraging their loved ones to keep fighting, telling them that they were home waiting for them to recover and get back. It was truly heartbreaking. I mean, that was the hardest part for me, to be honest. Like, to hear that and to feel like there's not much that you can do other than everything that you're already doing was the worst part for me.
And I guess just to piggyback on that a little bit, what was the absolute lowest that you felt throughout the course of, you know, taking care of patients during this pandemic?
At those times, doing those FaceTimes was the lowest that I could feel because I felt powerless. I felt like literally it brought me to tears every time I had to do it. And if it wasn't at that point, it was on my way to work, you know, praying that, you know, that we make some kind of progress in taking care of these patients, because it was discouraging. There were a lot of people dying. You know, it wasn't uncommon to have at least one patient die every day that I was at work. It wasn't, you eventually started to get numb to it because it was happening in the background. It might not have been even your patient, you know, but I remember taking care of one patient for 2 straight days and people coming up to me saying like, oh, you know, like, what did you guys change? He's doing so much better than when he first came in. And I was like, I don't know. I'm just doing whatever they're telling me to do. You know, I'm just doing what I usually do as a nurse. And so I gave report to the night shift, and I was like, look, I'm off tomorrow, and to be honest, I'm gonna offer to come in just so that I can take care of him on third day, because like, you know, I developed a relationship with the family through the FaceTime sessions, and you know, I just wanted to continue the care if it was going to continue his progress, you know. And she's like, no, don't worry about it. You know, come back when you're supposed to come back. And I was like, just, you know, here's a report. You know, just do everything that you can. You know, I come back, you know, in 2 days. You know, I'm hoping that he's still here so I can take care of him again. And like when I came back, unfortunately, he had a sudden decline the day that I was off. And, you know, it's not an uncommon thing. Like I told Maris, like the decline sometimes happens pretty quickly, and there's not much that we can do. These patients are usually maxed out on all the medications that we could possibly give them, and all those medications have side effects on the body as well. So you can't continue to do that for long periods of time and expect that there's going to be a positive outcome.
So, Jensen, I want to real quick before, I want to say to you personally, to all the other healthcare workers that have to go through something like that, thank you, because being on the other end of that, as part of the family that has had to say, goodbye to someone that you love over the phone, and I'm speaking for my aunt and my 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 wife's cousins that had to do that. If you were not there, man, to help us facilitate those emotions when we can't be there, I don't know how we would get through. So, personally, to you and to all the the frontline healthcare workers, thank you for just being our way of helping us cope with the loss that we're trying to process without being there physically. I mean, I think without you guys, man, and not being able to, we wouldn't be able to do anything as far as having to facilitate our grief. And it's been a tough week here for me and my family. But again, without you guys, it'd be worse. So I want to just give you some positive energy, man. Just to even in a dark spot that you might be in at work, potentially some days you're our light there. And I just want to let you know that even though you're at the lowest point of the day at work, I want to let you know that you're still the light for a lot of other people, man. And I think, again, without you guys there on the front lines doing the work that you're doing, I mean, no matter how many hits you're going to take, I mean, you're doing it for the safety of basically everybody in the world, and I appreciate you for that, man.
Yeah, man, thank you for sure. I mean, it's so weird to get thanked through all of this. It's like the way I put it is like the whole the thank hour at 7 o'clock where people are cheering and clapping and making noise. It's amazing. I come on my days off when I'm at home and I hear it. It literally like fills me with joy, and it's such an unusual feeling for us as healthcare workers. Like the only way I can put it is it's like, to me it reminds me of like the applause and the praise that like veterans get when they get thanked for their service. Like that's what it feels like. And like in a sense, because I know that I'm not a veteran, it feels like it's like inappropriate. But like I want everyone to know we appreciate any of the praise or thanks or donations that you guys have provided to the hospitals and nursing homes and everything. We are super, super thankful for all of that. We're literally just doing our jobs, and we're just trying to help people so that we can all get through this.
For me, the other part for me that I'm super proud of, right, is there's a generation of women that came to America in the 70s and early 80s that comprise our moms, our aunts, and you guys, my brother's age, your age, that's taken up this mantle, so nobly, in the face of especially what's going on now, right? It really, heartens me, and I'm so proud of you guys. To Marik's point about, we look up to our moms and our titas for everything that they do, and sometimes, I don't want to say we look down on our younger people, but we certainly discount our younger people, right? And I think this new generation of healthcare workers, I've seen so many now, and I'm so proud of all you guys. Like I said, you've really taken up this mantle and made the generations before you so much prouder. And I think you're doing a great service to them, keeping up that reputation of being a Filipino. And that's what it is, right? There's been a reputation for Filipino healthcare workers for many, many decades. They've been the bedrock of a lot of these hospitals. A lot of doctors depend on them. I'm using the word depend, right? And you guys are, like I said, admirably taking on that baton and really just running with it. So yeah, I echo Merrick's sentiments 100%. And I just want to say, like I said, we're super proud of this new generation as well. And we feel pride because you're like our younger brothers, our little brothers. I mean, obviously you're a prep guy, right? We're older prep alums. So to see you guys doing so well, again, makes me super proud also.
Thank you.
Amen. Yeah, Jansen, don't need to tell you anything more than Marison and Jet have so eloquently stated, but definitely proud of you, Ray, everyone else that have, as Jet put it, taken up the mantle, and you guys have stepped up in a big way. Keep up the good work. Keep doing what you're doing. Absolutely love how you're sharing your story, your experience, and we can't wait to share this pod with the masses, to our audience. But on that note, I gotta ask, what can you tell guys like us, three dads with a mic, and our audience, what we could do to help healthcare workers like yourself?
I mean, to be honest, the main message for me to anybody out there, especially you guys, is wash your hands. Like, to me, I think that is the biggest thing that you can do to help prevent you guys from getting sick, help prevent other people from getting sick, is to wash your hands as frequently as you think you need to. If you have to take the subway, take some Purell as soon as you get off the subway. If you are about to eat, please make sure you wash your hands before you grab that burger or those fries. If you're in the car and you're going through the drive-thru, try to wait until you get home. Don't go rushing into the bag while you're driving out of the drive-thru.
That's tough.
You, unless you're gonna literally sanitize your hands after you pay, then fine. I give you permission, Ace, to dig into the bag, right?
Thank
Bro,
you. I need your blessing.
My wife, every time we have to pick up food now for the kids or for myself, she says, "You had better wait till we put all that on a plate."
Throw it in the microwave, right?
Right. If you reach into that bag, I'm gonna knock you out. I'm just, oh my god. My wife's very aggressive with this, so I'm just.
You know what, Jansen? I'm now forever gonna look at that bag of fries like sitting shot with guilt now, with shame.
Shame. Yeah, you get shame belled. All right. Again, thank you. We appreciate you jumping on. Coronavirus RN on Instagram, right?
Yep.
And coronavirus _RN on Facebook. Anything else?
Coronavirus _RN is Instagram. Okay. And then just coronavirus _RN is Facebook. And then Jansen.realtor on Instagram as well. If you guys want to follow me on there. I have some more like economical coronavirus information on there for all the small business owners that I know. I've been sharing that on that front.
So shout out.
Yeah, if you need those, you got some house needs, you know who to call. Bruno Mars.
Bruno. Get that a lot.
Yeah, Jet. Since Jet mentioned it, I gotta ask you, how do you keep your hairstyle up and flowy like you do when you're not wearing a hat? And how do you keep that volume up? Is it blow drying? Is it the product?
Yeah,
is it both?
I think it's three. It's the blow drying, it's the product, it's the technique.
Oh man, damn! I gotta practice.
Listen, man, we got kids, bro. We don't got that much time.
I know.
Dude,
I mean, to be honest, this is the shortest it's ever taken me to do my hair ever in my life, though. It's much shorter than when I used to do spikes and the mohawk and all the other stuff that I was doing.
That's right. Yeah, you did have the mohawk. That's right.
All right, brother.
If you ever need a house, baby.
All right,
Thanks again
man.
for
We
having me, guys.
appreciate you being on. Thanks everybody for joining us. Again, there's no words we can say. You guys are doing God's work. We appreciate you guys, and we'll check you later. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.